So glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Martini Lunch. As you know, Jim Garrity is away, so today we're very happy to bring in Tevi Troy, well-known presidential historian. He is also an accomplished author, most recently The Power and the Money, the epic clashes between commanders-in-chief and titans of industry. Tevi, great to have you with us again.
Thanks for having me. I'm always sorry when Jim goes away, but I'm glad for the opportunity to host one of my favorite podcasts.
Oh, fantastic. So much to get to today. We'll talk about the shutdown, obviously, which went into effect at midnight when the votes for competing funding bills did not get to 60 votes yesterday. It's the Democrats who are voting no, who are potentially going to get the blame, but depends on who you ask. Chuck Schumer has a different opinion on that. We'll also get some interesting thoughts from Reid, who's actually right about something, which is amazing. And we'll start off, of course, with what's happening with the Middle East in a kind of a double-fisted first martini here, Tevi. First of all, on Monday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was at the White House with President Trump, and that's where Trump unveiled this 21-point plan for not only ending the war and getting the hostages released, and in exchange for that, there'd be a bunch of Palestinian prisoners released, but also, getting Hamas out of Gaza, ending it as a terror zone, and having kind of this group effort to develop Gaza as something other than a terrorist haven. That's kind of the very quick summary here, but number one on the list, of course, is a de-radicalized terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. There is some reporting that Netanyahu didn't love this deal. He demanded some changes, a few of which Trump accepted, some of which he didn't. But the Trump was ultimately kind of in a take it or leave it sort of mode with Netanyahu, because he was actually very upset with the attack in Qatar a few weeks ago. So first of all, before we get to the relationship with the Qataris, what do you make of the deal? Some people are saying it's brilliant. Other people are yawning and saying it's never going to work because Hamas is never going to stop doing terrorism. So what's your take?
Well, I'm not sure Hamas is never going to accept the deal. They're never going to stop doing terrorism, but if they are removed from the territory, if they have to give up their weapons, that's a good thing. Also, if they give up the hostages, then they have no leverage over Israel, and Israel can do whatever it has to do if Hamas rears its very ugly head again and causes trouble. So I think there's a lot to like in the deal. I also am not quite sure about this whole story that Netanyahu was given a take it or leave it approach from Trump. It could be that the White House is putting out that story so that Hamas says, oh, wow, the Netanyahu is really under the gun on this, too. You never know with Trump. If you read Jared Kushner's memoir, which is actually really interesting, it talks about the way Trump will game the public situation so as to affect the private negotiations. Sometimes Kushner would say we're stuck on a certain point, and Trump said, well, what if I put out this crazy tweet that completely upsets the apple cart, and then you can have a new crack at whatever you're trying to get at in the negotiation. So you never know with these stories what's really happening. And I hope the deal is accepted. This last week was the beginning of the Jewish New Year, and we went around the table. We asked what our hopes are for the year, and my hope is to get those hostages free. It has just gone on too long. It's terrible. I feel bad for them families. I feel bad for the whole state of Israel, and I feel bad for the West. This just shouldn't happen, and I would like to see them free. And if this deal can do that, I'm for it.
Well, yeah, we're less than a week away from 2 years since the October 7th attacks, and I can't even fathom what those hostages have been through. Some are still alive, some are dead and still in Hamas custody and so forth. And so the idea that this is kind of a take it or leave it now for Hamas, this is your last chance to not be annihilated here. You've already got the Qataris and the Egyptians and the Turks, who are, probably of those three, the most hostile towards Israel, saying to Hamas, you got to take the deal. You got to take the deal. So will they take the deal?
Well, I can't speak for, evil savages who care not a whit about their own population or anybody else's lives. But I will say this, the fact that the Qataris are saying, take the deal, means that maybe that so-called failed strike on the Hamas leaders on Qatari territory has the Qataris thinking twice about their actions. They thought they could just happily, blithely sit around and let Hamas be in their hotels raking in billions of dollars, and that there was no consequences to them. And I think the Israeli strike showed that there are potential consequences to housing this genocidal organization. And so I think maybe with Qatari pressure and with Turkish pressure and with Egyptian pressure, the Hamas sure doesn't care about Israel or the U.S., but maybe the pressure from those entities could make a difference here.
Tevi, what do you make of this policy, I guess, that the White House issued a few days ago, basically sending the warning that any armed attack on the territory, sovereignty, or critical infrastructure of the state of Qatar is seen by the United States as a threat to the peace and security of the United States, and the U.S., in event of such an attack, will take all lawful and appropriate measures, including diplomatic, economic, and if necessary, military, to defend the interests of the U.S. and the state of Qatar. So is that kind of just another way of broadening out what they're trying to accomplish here, or do you think this is a direct response to what happened a few weeks ago?
Yeah, people think this is directed right at Israel, but it's actually also directed at Iran. The Iranians also attacked Qatari territory during the 12-day war when they were supposedly going after an American base, and they said, we're warning you that we're going after this base. But the Qataris had their sovereign land attacked twice by Israel and Iran. It's kind of weird to have both those countries going after you. And so I think the Qataris are a very small country. They don't have a powerful military, so they're understandably nervous. And in order to get them to play ball, I think this guarantee from the U.S. is I think a good thing to give up. And from the Israeli perspective, it's not like Israel's going to do it again, but Iran is a continued worry. So I think that it's a smart move.
Last question here, and let me move up to the very beginning of what the White House issued a couple days ago. It says, over the years, the U.S. and the state of Qatar have been bound together by close cooperation, shared interests, and the close relationship between our armed forces. The state of Qatar has hosted U.S. forces, enabled critical security operations, and stood as a steadfast ally in pursuit of peace, stability, and prosperity, both in the Middle East and abroad, including as a mediator that has assisted the United States' attempts to resolve significant regional and global conflicts. And so in recognition of this, they're going to protect Qatar as best they can. Some folks will look at that and say, yes, they've acted as a mediator. Others would say they housed Hamas's political leadership for a long time, including Ismail Haniyeh, until he made that ill-fated decision to visit Tehran. And they also facilitated the Bo Bergdahl trade, taking 5 al-Qaeda figures in exchange for a guy who was basically deserting his forces. And so is Qatar the middleman that they want to portray themselves as, or are they something else?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of the Qataris, but you make your allies where you can in the Middle East, and they do have some sway over Hamas, because without them, Hamas would be these vagabonds going from place to place. So I think the U.S. has in the past seen some value in having them in Qatar as opposed to in Iran, where the U.S. has a little more say over what happens. So I don't sign me up for the Qatari fan club, but I would say that there are reasons to work with them.
All right. Well, plenty to see and pay attention to there. Will Hamas accept the deal? They've been given a few days to make a decision, and we're about halfway through that window of opportunity. So we'll probably find out this week. But in the meantime, how you feeling today? Did you get a good night's sleep? Well, whether you did or whether you didn't, if you're sleeping on Boll and Branch sheets, your odds are much better of having a great night's sleep. Mrs. Columbus and I can attest to the quality of Boll and Branch sheets. I know I talk about this every time, but I love it because other sheets just don't do this. They got these big pockets on the corners of the fitted sheet that, regardless of the size of your mattress, they easily fit under, and so the corners don't pop off. I love that. I'm so happy about that. And they get softer with each wash. I don't know how the technology works, but it's amazing. They're also breathable to sleep in, so you can add more layers without making your bed feel heavy or hot. They're made with the highest quality 100% organic cotton in durable designs. And they're available in new limited edition fall colors for a deeply comforting bedroom. And it comes with a 30-night worry-free guarantee. So start building your sanctuary of comfort this fall with Boll and Branch. For a limited time, get 20% off your first set of sheets plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com/3martini. Spell that all out, 3martini. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/3martini to save 20% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions do apply. All right. I did not stumble in the open, Tevi. I know this seems impossible, but Joy Reid is actually right about something, but she thinks it's a great condemnation of the right, not actually explaining what the right believes. Because usually when Joy Reid is talking about what the Republicans really want, it's a return to 1619 or 1933 Germany or something. She's completely unhinged 99.9% of the time. But on a recent podcast interview, she says, you know what the Republicans are really up to? You know what they really want? Take a listen to this.
Is that if you go back before the 20th century, there were no income taxes, there were no regulations on business. You could earn as much money as you want, leave 100% of it to your children with no taxes. Right. That's the world they want back. And to get it back, they need society to change. They need people to be less modern. They need people to want fewer things.
Want fewer things by keeping more of your own money, by having much lower or no income taxes. I would say less regulation, not no regulation. And when it comes to passing along your inheritance 100% to your kids, yes, because you've already paid taxes on that. Tevi, she figured us out, darn it.
Yeah, this interview reminds me of the 2009 movie Sherlock Holmes, where he says, well, now we have a firm grasp of the obvious. And it is totally true. The Republicans want lower taxes. They want lower regulations. They want you to be able to pass your wealth on to your children. And you know what? Most of the American people agree with those things. And it is Joy Reid who is out of touch with society, she's the one who wants to change America. She wants to make more people dependent on the government. So they won't want lower taxes and lower regulations, not passing on wealth, because there's no wealth to pass on if you just get a check from the government. And so I think she has the wrong view of America, and she somehow stumbled onto what the Republicans want, which is good things for Americans, for Republicans, and the Democrats would even benefit from it too if they actually open their eyes.
Exactly. And you put your finger on the point. She doesn't want you to be able to decide what to do with your money to do for you. She wants you to give your money to the government, and then the government, meaning people she agrees with in her mind, will decide what's best for you, which is the liberal mindset here. So,
yeah, it really reminds me of that Obama video or early automation thing where they showed the life of Julia. Where
yes.
There was this very non-gendered person walking around and did all these things in their life, and they get a loan from the government and they get prenatal care from the government, and there is no mention of family whatsoever in the whole thing. It's just you are this actor and the government gives you everything your whole life, and that is from birth to death, and that's what they want. And that is not what the American people want. That's not why people cross the oceans to get here. That's not why people are still clamoring to get in. They want the ability to be entrepreneurs, to be free, to make their own decisions, to have agency. And that is the opposite of what Joy Reid wants for everyone.
Exactly. Julia was freaky enough because she didn't have any eyeballs. But when you think about, more disturbingly, what the Democrats see as the ideal life for, in that case, a young woman, never having a husband, never having a family, and every step along the way, the government is basically substituting that role for you. And so, Tevi, I don't know what else she's going to lurch to that we want. Maybe we want, energy independence. Maybe we want strong borders. Maybe we want, end to abortion.
No crime.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just what could she discover next that she would be flabbergasted by, that we would just say, yeah, that's it, pretty much.
Yeah, look, Joy Reid, again, tells us what Americans want, what Republicans want. And, I'm sorry I brought up the Julia thing, because that movie was actually scarier than any Hitchcock movie I ever saw.
It was. Yeah, it was meant to be utopian, and it was completely dystopian. So people forget about the Obama administration and a lot of the really twisted things that were going on there. And that was part of the re-election campaign in 2012, and the fact that didn't sink him was quite something. So, Joy Reid, it's like a broken clock. It's right twice a day. Joy Reid, you're not right that often, but you got one right this time. It's just hilarious that you think that that's some sinister plot that we want to keep our money and pass it along to our kids. All right. Well,
with less regulations.
Yes, exactly. And so, once again today, I'm happy to be decked out in a shirt from Mizzen and Main, unlike the short sleeve options I sported on Monday and Tuesday. This one is a long sleeve option, and it's a little bit thicker. This is going to be a great fall and winter shirt. Super soft, very comfortable, and it's just part of the fantastic collection at Mizzen and Main. And when it comes to dress clothes, let's be honest. They're often uncomfortable. They're high maintenance. You got to take them to the cleaners all the time. And you just spend too much time ironing, dry cleaning, all that stuff. So imagine a crisp, comfortable white dress shirt you can wear every day of the week without constant washes or taking them to the cleaners, and that's exactly what Mizzen and Main delivers. Mizzen and Main makes classic menswear with performance fabric, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel great. Their shirts and pants look refined, yet they're stretchy, lightweight, moisture-wicking, wrinkle-resistant, and completely machine-washable. No ironing or dry cleaning required. When you put on their clothes, you'll feel the difference instantly. Professional style that's actually comfortable. Right now, Mizzen and Main is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com, promo code 3ML20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Main, M-A-I-N.com, promo code 3ML20, the number 20, 3ML20, for 20% off. Mizzenandmain.com, promo code 3ML20, and if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen and Main stores in select states. All right, Tevi, on to our final martini now. And as of midnight, the federal government is in a partial shutdown. There were a couple of votes in the Senate last night, one on the Democratic version, which would add over $1 trillion in new spending for health care for illegals, reviving Obamacare subsidies, which are necessary or thought to be necessary because the Affordable Care Act turns out to be not so affordable. And they also want to start funding PBS and NPR again and stuff like that. But that didn't happen. And then the Republican version, which is essentially a clean extension, got 55 votes, but it needs 60. Two Democrats, essentially, John Fetterman and the independent, who's really a Democrat, Angus King, voting to keep the government open. So as of right now, we got the partial shutdown, and we've got the finger pointing going on. Let's start with Vice President J.D. Vance this morning, talking about the incoherent Democrat arguments.
What do Senate Democrats ask for? Well, initially, they said that they wanted to shut down the government because Donald Trump was a dictator. Okay, that's absurd. Then they said they wanted to shut down the government because they wanted hundreds of billions of dollars for health care benefits for illegal aliens. That, of course, is also absurd. And now they're saying they just want to work on ensuring that Americans have low-cost health care. Well, I agree with them. Of course, we all want to ensure that Americans have low-cost health care, so let's work together on that. You don't shut the government down. You don't take the government as a hostage because you want to engage in a negotiation about health care costs. Let's do that negotiation, but let's do it in the context of actually opening the government and ensuring those essential services are actually provided to the American people.
And so, Tevi, there's a smattering of polls out there on who's to blame if the government shuts down. Some of them, many of them operated by Democratic affiliated firms, suggest it's the Republicans. But the New York Times, that bastion of conservative bias, the New York Times in their New York Times Siena poll, says views on whether the Democrats should or should not shut down the government if their demands are not met. Respondents, 65% should not. 27% of all respondents said they should. Even among Democrats, only 47% said they should and 43% said they shouldn't. Independents lopsided in favor of not shutting it down, 59-32, and Republicans obviously lopsided as well, 92-5. Chuck Schumer doesn't like that poll, though. He's decided that it's rigged or biased or something, so he took to the Senate floor, knowing that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, was going to refer to it, and Schumer decided, to call out the bias of the New York Times.
Now, I know the leader is going to show a poll that says that Democrats will be blamed for the shutdown. There are many more polls that show Republicans are blamed. The question in that poll is biased. Biased. In the New York Times, but it's biased. If you turn the... That's true. I don't always believe the New York Times. You can be sure of that. Neither do you. Okay.
So, Tevi, should the Democrats shut down the government? Could be seen as a biased question as opposed to which side should be blamed if it happens. But Chuck Schumer tried to spin out of this because he's, going to take a lot of heat for doing a really stupid thing here and trying to win back the support of the base, which is never going to happen.
Greg, somehow I've gone this long in hosting without giving a diehard quote. And I think the only quote that fits in this situation is when John McClane says, "Welcome to the party, pal." Chuck Schumer finally recognizes that the New York Times is biased. You could hear the laughter from the Republicans on the Senate floor when he made that comment. Yes, the New York Times is biased. It's part of their business model to be biased. In fact, James Bennett, the op-ed editor who was drummed out after the Tom Cotton op-ed, wrote a long piece about the New York Times. He said that 90% of their readers are left-wing. And what they want from the New York Times is validation of their view, but validation from a supposedly neutral source, which the New York Times has pretended to be but no longer is. And so that's what the New York Times tries to do. Chuck Schumer reads it every morning and is all excited because it validates his point of view. And the one time there's something that doesn't necessarily help his case, suddenly he says the New York Times is biased. Well, again, welcome to the party, pal. We're happy to have you on this case, and we can all talk about how biased the New York Times is.
Yeah, no question about it. And I'm starting to wonder if Chuck Schumer is going to run for re-election next time. I mean, he was elected in 1998, so he'll be up in 2028, so he's not the next cycle, but the one after that. As Jim says, he's about as popular as Ebola. I guess it would depend on who would challenge him in the primary. AOC is the one who keeps being mentioned, but now she's toying with running for president because she's finally be old enough. And, so whether he would get a walk in the park without much competition or whether he would face a fierce challenge. I think if he gets a fierce challenge, he probably hangs it up. What do you think?
Well, Craig, you correctly note that he was elected to the Senate in 1998, but he was in the U.S. House for 2 decades before that. Yeah. So most people listening to this were not born when Chuck Schumer started infecting the American people with his very left-wing views and his left-wing policies. And he's been around Washington for a long time. Maybe it's time to hang up his spurs. The only problem is that from New York, you would probably get someone even more radical and even more left-wing than he is. So I'm not going to say that Chuck Schumer is a moderate because he's not, but the way the Democratic Party is going, whoever comes after him would probably be worse.
Yeah, this is probably taking a little bit too far, but I've seen like the shift in the Democratic Party, especially as they shove out the old guard and bring in a younger, more radical wing. It's kind of like the Arab Spring of American politics, where you don't love Chuck Schumer. You'd be perfectly fine to see him shoved off into retirement until you see what comes next. Because, people are like, I didn't like Mubarak that much. And then, the Muslim Brotherhood's going to take over now. Well, I certainly didn't want that. Or Gaddafi, he caused us a lot of problems a long time ago. Who cares? We're going to have total chaos and we're going to have an ambassador murdered after we remove him from power. So be careful what you wish for. But the Democrats are lurching so far left. I don't know if that's an apt analogy, Tevi, but it seems like change in the Democratic Party only means things are getting worse.
Yeah, it's true. But I am old enough to remember that there were times when the Democratic Party did change for the better. In the 90s, for example, Bill Clinton said, well, maybe we shouldn't be lurching so far left, and he moved the Democrats right, and that's how he was able to get elected in 1992, and then he got spanked because he drifted too far left in his first 2 years, and then he moved back to the center again to win that 96 election. So, they say there's no education in the third kick of a mule. The Democrats aren't learning the lesson. But at some point, if they ever want to win elections, certainly national elections, or win in non-blue states, then they're going to have to change their tune.
Yeah. Last question on the shutdown. You've certainly studied presidential history, and most of the shutdowns, or a lot of the shutdowns anyway, have been more recent, certainly about 30 years ago with the one with the new Republican Congress and Bill Clinton. The media is always on the side of the Democrats, and it all depends on the makeup of Congress and who's in the White House as to how they frame the Republican blame. For example, in the Obama years, when the Republicans controlled the House and Ted Cruz did the filibuster and everything, and it's like, well, you just don't have the leverage. The Democrats have the Senate, the Democrats have the White House. Yeah, you have the House, but come on, they've got 2 out of 3, and you just don't have that leverage. And now Republicans have the White House, they've got the Senate, they've got the House. What they don't have is 60 votes, and still the media is figuring out a way. Even though the Republicans basically want to keep things exactly as it is, somehow they're the bad guys here.
Yeah, well, I'm really curious to see how this shutdown plays out, because previously the way it played out is the Democrats had the White House, and when the shutdown happens, they would shut down the things that are most painful to the American people so they could say, see, look at all the good things the federal government does for you the Republicans are taking away. But now the Republicans are in charge, and there's plenty of things that the federal government does that nobody likes and nobody cares about, and the Democrats want those things. And if Russ Vought, who's the head of OMB and the Republican administration, they go ahead and they remove things that are unpopular not useful, but are good Democrat priorities, not good Democrat, but high Democrat priorities, then the shutdown will be more painful to the Democrats, and the rest of the country will just say, the government is shut down, but the world is still spinning on its axis. The sun is still shining, and it really won't bother the regular American people just as much.
Yeah, and there's certainly rumors out there that Rust vote is potentially going to be rearranging some things and perhaps eliminating positions as a result of the shutdown. So this quixotic fight from the Democrats might end up backfiring even more than having to just crawl back and eventually vote for a clean extension. So we'll find out. Tevi, great to have you with us as always. Thanks as always for the diehard drop-ins, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks for having me.
Tevi Troy is a highly respected presidential historian. He's also an accomplished author. The most recent book, The Power and the Money, The Epic Clashes Between Commanders-in-Chief and Titans of Industry. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us again today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow all of us on X. Tevi's at Tevi Troy. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Wednesday. Join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.